If you're ever in a room with opera singers and you get to feel what it's like to be in a room or a hall with people that look like you and me, and then they open their mouths and these amazing otherworldly sounds come out of their mouth. That's a visceral experience that just still moves me today.
Music is something that touches the human spirit and amplifies whatever it is added to. Music can tell the stories of a nation or start a community tradition. Everett McCorvey understands the deep impact music can make on the soul. He has had a life filled with and inspired by the power of singing. As the director of the University of Kentucky Opera Theater, McCorvey has had a tremendous impact on the school's opera students, among many others. McCorvey works to spread the joy and meaning of music. His love and admiration for the art began at a young age and built him into who he is today.
I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was really during the height of the civil rights movement. And my father and mother were involved in the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. My father was a deacon at the church where Reverend David Abernathy was the minister. Reverend Abernathy was the assistant to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King lived a couple of blocks from my home, and both the Abernathy and King family were friends of my family. And so I heard my father, through my father's church, many choirs came to Montgomery in support of the civil rights movement. And they sang at my dad's church. And so I would hear these beautiful voices from college students singing this music, and it moved me greatly. Also, Martin Luther King loved spirituals. And so in his sermons, he would quote text from spirituals. And so I would hear these spirituals in this text. And so it was really something that moved me greatly and something that I really wanted to have as a part of my musical life for my entire life. And so because of those experiences, I learned a lot of spirituals, heard a lot of spirituals, and wanted to make sure that young people learn these spirituals, because the way the music survives is by passing it down to the next generation. And that's what I feel that we're doing with the American Spiritual Ensemble. The American Spiritual Ensemble is an organization of about 25 singers. They're all professional singers, and it's a group that I founded 30 years ago with the mission of keeping the American Negro Spiritual alive. We tell the stories and present the songs of the American Negro Spirituals. It's a group that I founded because when I was growing up, American Negro Spirituals were very, very important in my growing up in Montgomery, Alabama. And then as I got to be a professional, I noticed that gospel music was sort of becoming very popular, and the American Negro Spirituals were being lost. And so I wanted to make sure that this tradition of American Negro Spirituals stayed alive. I call spirituals the mother music. When the enslaved came over to this country, they came here against their will. They came, they couldn't sing their songs. They were separated from their families. They couldn't speak their language. They had to learn a whole new way of communicating. Slave masters, however, did allow them to sing, because the slave masters noticed that when they sang, they produced more work. And so what the slave masters didn't know, however, was that as these enslaved people sang, they were also communicating, they were sending signals all through singing. And so the other thing that they were allowed to do is they were allowed to attend church because the slave masters thought if they attended church, they would become more docile. And so, but what happened was they learned through church about the characters that were in the Bible and realized that if God took care of those characters in the Bible, the least of those in the Bible, that surely he would take care of the least of those in society. And they, of course, felt they were the least in society. And so they would learn about characters like Moses and David and Jonah, and they would go back to their own camps and create songs about these characters. And then they would sing these songs, and they would sing these songs in the plantation fields, and they created all of these songs about these characters. And that's how spirituals were born. They're usually unaccompanied, typically one voice singing. Then you may have a group response that's called call and response. Now, spirituals are typically accompanied by maybe a piano or an instrument like a djembe, an African drum. But that's it. And then it's the natural voice. Spirituals are over 400 years old because that's how long the enslaved had been in this country. And this is a music that they created. And so that's the story that I like to tell because I want to make sure that these important songs are not lost. Gospel music is it uses more popular idioms. It uses like drums, keyboards, and drum set, things like that. And the chordal structure is more along the lines of popular music, whereas the spirituals, again, are unaccompanied and typically they're folk songs that have been, and they are now American folk songs that should be sung by all. I was at a spirituals. We presented a concert recently, and gosh, we've performed all over the world. And we were singing the spiritual Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And this lady came up to me afterwards. She said, I've sung that my whole life, and I didn't know it was a spiritual. It was just a song that my mother used to sing to us when we were going to bed at night. And so when you sang it in your concert and you told the story, she said, I didn't know that. I was out in, the American Spiritual Ensemble was out in Santa Fe recently, and we sang the spiritual Go Down Moses. And I had a man come up to me from the Jewish faith, and he said, I didn't realize that Go Down Moses was a spiritual. He said, in my synagogue, we sing that all the time. And I thought it was a Jewish song. And so I think that that's what happens with these spirituals. They have so many, they have become a part of our just really American musical ecosystem. And a lot of times people don't know where they came from. But that's the story that we try to tell. I was growing up, and spirituals were really the music of choice. And then, of course, gospel music began to take hold and become very popular. And as these spirituals were sort of being moved out of the sort of the musical highlights, I wanted to make sure that spirituals stayed in our culture, because what I'm noticing is a change now, and a lot of choirs are singing spirituals. So I'm very excited about that, because now not only are we singing spirituals, but we're telling the story of these spirituals. And for me, that's very exciting and rewarding.
Throughout his professional career, McCorvey has worked to spread both the joy and meaning of music. He feels that music and art are meant to be shared with the world, and that not only should it be shared, but we should encourage the participation in the glories that art brings. From conducting the packed crowds of Rupp Arena and Kroger Field in the national anthem, to working to give his students opportunities to perform for these crowds, McCorvey understands the importance of music in everyday life.
You know, it's mostly when she felt like she was in trouble. I feel first that everybody should sing, and singing is a very disarming feature. It's a very disarming way to be able to communicate. I think what brings people together is singing. And that's something that also goes back to my growing up, because, of course, when Martin Luther King was marching, they were singing. And so the idea of communal singing is something that I have done and experienced since I was a child. And so I think when people sing together, it brings them closer together. And so the thing that I like to do more than anything is get people to sing. You can either do both, or you can do one. Okay. Maybe if the first one's in head voice because you're seeing somebody, but then the second one you have to tell somebody. Oh, okay. Okay, good. One of the things that I try to do in all of my work is I feel that we should not work in silos. We should work really globally in terms of engaging people with what we do. You know, the arts are always challenged because whenever there's a funding cut, where do they go first? They go to the arts. They'll cut the band program, or they'll cut the choral program or the theater program. We're always on the chopping block. And I feel that part of that is because we don't do enough work engaging the community. And when we engage the community, when they are thinking about these decisions, it's not just a program, it's people. And what do the arts bring to a community? They bring an opportunity for parents to find opportunities for their kids to take ballet and violin and voice lessons and be involved in theater. They help shape the community. And so if you look at the thriving communities around the country, in every one of them, you will also find a thriving arts community. Imagine New York or Chicago or San Francisco without art. Why do people go to New York? They go to New York to see shows, you know, or they go to New York to take in the museums, or they go to New York for fashion. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons, but they evolve around the creative activity that's happening in that city. Imagine going to a basketball game and no music, or a football game and no music. Be pretty boring. And so people don't think about the ways that music and arts play a part. Imagine watching a commercial without any music. In order for those things to happen, you have to have a thriving arts community. And so I feel that the arts are vital to not only a university, but also to the community. I have been fortunate to be in programs that have been thriving, and I think one of the reasons is because I make sure that I'm not working in a silo. I make sure that our students are not working in silos.
I'll say you said hello.
When I arrived here at UK, the first thing I did was send our students into the communities to sing at weddings, sing at funerals, sing at different business events, sing at athletic events. You know, when I came here, I worked with C.M. Newton, who was the athletic director at the time, to make sure that UK students were the students singing at basketball games. So that, again, we're giving students the opportunity. So I'm looking, I look for ways to engage our students in the community. And so that's what makes, I feel, the difference in terms of the community then responding to the arts and saying, hey, the arts are important. I've been here 33 years. I think I've been scheduling singers in coordination with athletics for 32 of those 33 years, because I wrote a letter to C.M. Newton at the time, because I used to sing at a lot of the games when I was at Alabama. C.M. Newton was at Alabama as a coach, so we knew each other from the Alabama days. But I said to him, I said, we have students here from all over the Commonwealth who would love to have the opportunity to sing for 22,000 fans. And so instead of bringing these, you know, country music stars and all like that, use our students. And so then that introduces the program also to the community. So the agreement was that the national anthem would be sung by UK college students or alumni or faculty, and but UK would reserve a few games for country music stars or other music stars, but primarily it would be the UK students.
Oh, there's a space between us.
I know, yeah.
Does that matter when you search for stuff?
Yes, it does. Of course. No, I don't have it. It is very comfortable with, and then have something in English just in case. And so we're thinking of one of the beach pieces.
Oh, of course.
If you think about these big celebratory events, and we think about them without music, they are not very celebratory, because music touches people in a different way than music. Certainly we can have words, but when you put music to it, it touches a different part of the human spirit. And it's because when people hear music, it elevates events to a different level. Music is the language that is used to capture these events and tell these stories and to elevate them to a higher event. I'm just delighted that I'm in the field that does that.
We should not work in silos is the message McCorvey instills in his students on a day-to-day basis. Not only does he encourage his students to seek opportunities to perform outside the classroom, but he actively creates ways for his students to do just that. UK Opera Theatre hosts 2 opera performances a year, alongside the various performances given by the UK Theatre Department and UK choirs. One of those opportunities, and one of the biggest performances of the year, is It's a Grand Night for Singing.
Grand Night for Singing was a concert that I created, again, about 30 years ago. And the reason I did that was because of my experience in New York City. When I was freelancing in New York, I didn't even call myself an opera singer. I called myself a performing artist because I did everything. I did Broadway, I did television, I did movies, I did recordings, I did everything. And so there was not, okay, I'm an opera singer, I can only do this. Because as I tell my students, if you want to work, you should be as versatile as you can be. And so that's something that I wanted to do, was to make sure that our students at UK, when they graduate, that they would be versatile and could do more than just one style of music. And so while many of the students come here to sing opera, but many students come just to learn how to sing. You know, we have students who are singing in Nashville, we have students on Broadway, we have students who are doing popular music, we have students certainly performing opera in many of the great opera houses. So the idea is to learn how to sing and then to learn how to sing styles. I want our students to be as versatile as they can. So we started Grand Night with the idea that we would teach them the music of Broadway and musical theater, so that then they were learning about opera, but they weren't learning about this other form of music. And so we started that, and it has been an incredible experience. I remember the very first year that we presented Grand Night for Singing, the director of the school at the time, his name was Harry Clark, he said, Everett, he came back, you know, we were supposed to start like 7:30, and he came back stage about 7:15 and said, Everett, you won't be able to start at 7:30. And I was like, why? And he said, you have over 200 people in the lobby trying to buy tickets. And so at 7:30, I had to go out on stage and tell people, we'll be starting soon. We have people who are still buying tickets. And it took about another 20 minutes to get all of those people into the theater. And I thought, okay, this might be something that people will like. When I go out on stage at the beginning of the show, I have people raise their hand to say how many years they have attended Grand Night. And we have many people who have attended over 25 years. And we have some people who have attended all of the shows. And so it's very exciting. Most of the things I do outside of UK, I'll take some of my graduate students and some undergraduates sometimes to be involved, depending on the length of the project. Because again, I want to help them to then have those professional experiences. And so when I'm doing on tour with the American Spiritual Ensemble, I typically will take 2 or 3 students with me. When I'm performing at Lincoln Center, I take students with me. Up in Columbus, when I'm working with the opera, I take students with me. And so it gives them that experience to do that. And the university has, again, been very supportive of me helping these students to get to the next level in their field. It's one of the joys of my life, not only to perform at Lincoln Center, but also to be able to give young singers the opportunity to perform at one of the great halls in the world.